because Hamden's one of the few communities in the state that has one of these. And its purpose, the landfill that was there was a commercial landfill, and that licensing process, the landfill here is a generator-owned landfill, but there's still a licensing process and a transfer of licensing process that, while a community cannot be stricter than state law, and it can regulate but not prohibit, local regulation allows for a local process, meaning the local planning board reviews all of the information in regard to any of this and comes to its own determinations based on what that is. And the state has its own process that it does. But I think it would be in the town's best interest to have a local process that would address anything that might be proposed for that landfill beyond what's been verbally proposed to the town.
Okay.
And as I said, this looks complicated, and what it is the state process turned into a local process. And Hamden established a landfill oversight committee, which reviewed several times a year things like the water quality monitoring data that came from wells, and annual inspection reports and those kind of things, and sort of it was a way to encourage the DEP to hold the operator's feet to the fire in terms of staying in compliance with those kind of things. But as I said, I can only recommend, and I only know what it can do because I lived with it for years when I was in Hampton. And but what it doesn't do, this ordinance nor any other, is allow the town to prohibit. There's nothing in here that says that we can create an ordinance that just says you have to close tomorrow. We don't have the ability to do that, because it would be superseding state law, which has already granted a license for that facility. So regulating the local process is a worthwhile process if it ever came to that. And it may never, but I think that the town would be better served to have the kind of regulations in place that it can have if it was ever necessary to do that.
As part of, if we were to make an ordinance, for instance, I read in here, it talked about traffic patterns. For instance, could we say they have to come from the north on 15? Is that permissible within?
You can, that's not prohibition, that's regulation. And how stuff gets there and all that kind of thing is totally reasonable in terms of that. For example, in Hamden, when that was there, they could only approach from a certain area, so there wasn't taking it through downtown neighborhoods to get to Pine Tree. It was right off the exit off the interstate that got them there.
I mean, for instance, to us, that could be you have to come in on 15 and you have to leave on 15?
Well, that would, if it got to the point that it was active again. This landfill truly hasn't been active since the mill closed in 2014. The minimal amount that's been disposed of since then was related to the closure, to the deconstruction of the mill, and much of that didn't get landfilled there because they crushed the concrete and that's on site as opposed to being disposed of in that facility, but it's been, the Ames sold the property to Whole Oceans in 2018 and retained one lot that was the corner lot that where the building is, that was sold, I believe, in December of 2021 to Black Bear Inc., which is, it's a co-located, it's a Whole Oceans piece. So right now, the only, and it's not AIM, it's Bucksport Mill LLC owns the landfill, and it owns the land on which the water system moves across to get from Silver Lake to the mill, and the dams and that piping system that connect Alamoosic and Toddy as well. So it's a generator-owned landfill, and there's no generator capacity at this moment. They have nothing to generate anything from.
So all of their licensing right now says that anything from the mill can go into that.
Their license isn't specific. Their license, it lists the types of things that can be disposed of there, but the only thing that could be disposed of there is the stuff generated by them related to that. But it was paper mill sludge and construction and demolition and wood waste, incidental waste, which doesn't have a definition in statute, but is.
But related to the mill and.
It was as a matter of fact, they, Bucksport Mill LLC which is a subsidiary of AIM, wanted to dispose of some construction and demolition debris from another site that AIM owns in Maine. And we said that's
We,
the town.
okay.
The town said, well, no, I'm
Okay,
sorry,
who-
you're
who-
right.
what?
No, me. When I found out they wanted to do that, I said, AIM isn't the owner here. Bucksport Mill LLC is the owner here. Bucksport Mill LLC didn't generate this. This was generated by an AIM.
But if the case had been that AIM did own it,
They
they
likely
could
could
have
have.
taken something from another site in Maine and brought it here?
That's the question. If they own it and were the generator, they could have.
I see.
And this is the concern around if they sell to another generating outfit, that,
Well, if that were the case, another generator could only dispose in that facility of what they generated. What they generated, and I think there's, with additional approval, they can dispose of 15% of the total from outside sources. But I know 15% is the thing, but the majority is another generator, meaning there isn't a path to commercial operation of that facility through a generator, a transfer to another generator.
mhm.
You-
And the licensing that they would have to go and change over.
If they stay within the confines of the license, their license is C&D, wood waste, sludge was removed, and incidental waste, which is,
Yes, but you've stated that it's the generator. In other words,
Yep.
they themselves generate the waste.
that's right,
They can put it in there under the present license.
that's correct.
They would have to change the license over to some other wording so that they can take trash from Florida and.
No,
Mississippi.
if they were gonna do anything, absolutely. The current license does not allow
And
for.
that takes place at the state level, that licensing.
That's correct, and that's why I said if we have a local regulation, then the same thing the state looks at in those terms, the town would be looking at.
But we don't license them. They would
No.
have to be licensed by the state.
But they would have to have a local permit in order to do that.
Okay, who in the state does that licensing? Is it the DEP, the
DEP.
EPA, the, okay, DEP, okay. All right, so we're not going to be licensing them for anything, correct? All we're gonna do is regulate.
We would, if they wanted a license to do that, they would also have to apply for a permit from the town for that same activity.
Yeah, and we will have copies and everything of all that licensing that takes place, okay. All right, thank you.
What if we don't give them the license?
Hmm?
What if the town doesn't give them the license?
Well, it depends on what a good job, how good a job you do in documenting there's two paths. If the state has, the license already exists. If the transfer of this would be what we'd really be talking about. The license is in existence. If they weren't gonna change the disposal types, the license would be the license. But the appeal would be to the state based on the transfer to whatever entity it was. And that review process is also substantial. It wasn't a pretty process when Verso transferred it first to Verso something else and then to Bucksport Mill. It was a pretty ugly process at the state level in terms of concern over whether AIM had sufficient technical ability to operate the landfill and whether the financial capacity existed as a set-aside for the eventual capping and closure of the site. And so a transfer looks at those items, but it also looks at this is a dormant landfill right now. And I think it's fair to say that from, certainly the information that we've received from the DEP about the condition of some of its stuff, that there isn't any way that if somebody signed a contract tomorrow that they could start hauling stuff in some new entity, because the leachate pond is leaking and there's questions about the leachate system and how much is being generated from that, and the temporary cover that's over things is in really bad shape, and the monitoring wells have not been, appear not to have been well maintained.
Okay, so there is a permit right now in place, and the town
Yep.
has a copy of that permit.
The town does not have a copy of that permit.
The present permit?
Yep, the license, yep, we can access that license, but
Yeah.
right now, we don't have any, there's nothing that we can do to that license. We
No, I
don't have
understand
any.
that, but it would be nice to have a copy of it, like we're gonna have a copy of the next one if they have to change their license, right?
They would
Or it comes under new
transfer that
ownership.
license, yes. If
Yeah.
it was gonna go to new ownership, they would be looking to transfer that license, but it would also have an environmental review component of what the landfill is.
Well,
and-
I kinda personally feel it'd be a good idea to look that over before I make much in the way of a decision on how to regulate it.
I'd be happy to
I'd
get a
like to see
copy
it.
for the,
Thank
of
you.
the,
I would like to see it.
I guess the brass tacks point of the question I asked a moment ago is this: let's say we dot every I and cross every T and deny based on what is being spoken about this evening. The bottom line is that the state could still.
well, the state, that happened in Hamden.
Right.
And Hamden lost
Mhm.
in 2000, but it was not that reason. They lost because they didn't put it through the process first. The code enforcement officer denied them anything because it was the expansion of a non-conforming use in a zone that wasn't. And so it didn't get the whole 9-yard thing until the court sent it back and said, put it through the 9-yard thing, and oh, by the way, you can't say no.
Yeah. But in theory, then that answers the question. In theory.
Well, it depends on that, because I'm not sure if the appeal had been done, if it had been done differently. people appeal things, that the state makes decisions that get appealed, and they get appealed to the board that I sit on, and occasionally they get overturned, or they get modified, or they get sent back for, go look at it again, those kind of things, depending on, and if there's a robust local process that identifies things that maybe didn't come up in the state process, or, that
It improves the odds that,
it certainly improves the odds that,
but still theoretically, in terms of, well, let's just say it, in terms of power, the ultimate power or the ultimate decision maker here, even if the town says, for a number of reasons, we're not gonna grant this, the state still could find that they.
the state could find that, but a court would be the one who decided who was right.
So, okay, well, that's,
That's where that would end up, and I'm certainly not advocating that we
No.
go looking for a court fight.
yeah,
You know, there are things here that we've learned in this process that we should be advocating for, apart from this, which is change in state regulation in regard to how C&D landfills are constructed. They should have to be lined. Leachate should not be permitted to be untreated and go into water bodies.
Right.
We didn't know this. We know this now, and we certainly should be active in advocating for our legislators to make those changes so that we don't have another PFAS discovery in 10 years when we see what came
Right.
from
yeah, that's a
going
good
down
point.
through,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of thing. So
Good
that,
example of how well the regulations are going right now.
what's that?
I said, that's a good example of how well the regulations are going right now.
Absolutely. I'm not arguing that one for a minute, Jim. I
Yeah.
said that that's part of the issue, but in looking at what the options are, we're doing due diligence on what the town has for, a verbal proposal was made that identified things, and my job is to look at what exactly would we be buying if we did that, and,
Or not be buying.
or not be,
You should be able to
that's what I'm
speak to what
saying.
we're not gonna, yeah, yeah.
That's
yeah,
right,
yeah.
that environmentally speaking, is this,
We're here tonight to look at these regulations that Hamden has written out
yep.
and make our decision on.
Well,
on
to make
what
a
we
decision if you want, and I gave you these because they pretty much mirror state statute and what you have to do.
Mhm.
Other than the fact that they had a very active landfill group in the community, and the landfill advisory committee had a representative from a bunch of different things, and when problems came up, it was a pretty active, very active for the first 10 years that I was in Hamden, until it was negotiated, kept, and closed by the town in 2010.
So tonight, we're just looking to make a
I'm
recommendation?
looking for whether or not you want me to take something like this and turn it into a Bucksport version that addresses not just commercial landfills, but
Yes, please.
generator-owned and
Mhm.
transfers, as well as licensing.
That thing that you had in our packet lacks a lot of the detail that's necessary for us to hammer out rules for this town. I didn't see anything saying how they got to their landfill. There was no use Route 15, use Route 5, use Route.
No, these are Hamden's, Jim, but she's saying
I
we'll craft
understand,
one
I
that
understand,
is
but
reflective
nowhere
of
in there does
Bucksport.
it say
Well, transportation
what
is in
direction
there.
they,
No, there's transportation in here, Jim.
yeah,
I mean, it's just a matter of we've got to craft something that reflects our town and not Hamden.
yeah. All it says is that they regulate how the stuff is brought there, whether it's by train, by truck, by
Yeah, there's a lot of boilerplate language, but
carried on somebody's.
I mean,
It's
I
not
think
coming by
what we're
train,
being
we
asked
got
to
no
do-
rail.
Yeah, that's
do we
a bad idea.
want to have the town, have Luke craft something that is reflective of our town?
Well, I think, I don't remember the number exactly, but I think it was number 3.1 said, oh, you got it all in right? Maybe I did too, let me look.
No, I copied this out. 3-1. 5-3.
It doesn't matter anyway, there was one in there that said, you can refuse and not go with these regulations or something, anyway, how it was worded, I really don't remember, I just looked at it, and it kinda was telling me that that's all we had to write. No, we don't want a landfill in Bucksport.
Well, I think we need some more regulation than that, as Sue said, to back up our point if we had to go to court.
Yeah. As long as that clause is in there, I'm happy with it.
Well, do we need a motion, or we just wanna?
Well, I'm just looking for general, will the committee, and there's more of you here than the committee, and anyone can speak who wants to, it's not limited to just committee members, that is there general support for the idea that we should look at something locally or not?
Yes.
Absolutely. I feel like the timing based on our calendar, like I feel like we're in neutral, getting ready to shift into gear, and now is the time to implement something like this.
Yeah, because if they come forward and we don't have it, we don't have it.
Exactly.
I'll give a non-committee yes.
So we're,
On board, yep.
Okay.
okay, just more tailored to the type of landfill that's here and the type of permitting and licensing that's necessary for that,
Yes.
which is not the same as Olive.
Do what you do.
All right. Item 4, Jim, is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Almost ready to make it.
All right. Meeting adjourned.